The Bold and the Beautiful B&B. Spoilers reveal that reality must be setting in for Luna Nozawa, Lisa Yamada, behind bars. Luna confessed once she was backed into a corner, but now she's locked up with plenty of time to think about how her plans went wrong. Of course, Luna also has plenty of time to come up with a new scheme entirely. One that could get her out of the slammer despite all the criminal charges. Could Luna's escape plot be in the works? It's possible Luna could get a redemption story, but most of us can agree she's a more entertaining character when she's doing wild things and landing in trouble with the law. If we're being honest, there wouldn't be much of a point to redeeming Luna. If Luna went back to being a nice character, she probably wouldn't get very interesting material. However, we'd say the show could still get a lot of mileage out of Luna as a villain. Luna just has to find a way out of prison so she can unleash her next wave of terror. With that in mind, maybe Luna should take a page out of Sheila Sharp's Kimberlin Brown playbook. B&B fans may recall how Sheila sweet-talked Mike Guthrie, Ken Haynes, into helping her escape when he was a prison guard. Perhaps Luna could do something similar if she finds a prison guard of her own to target. It's easy to imagine Luna putting her seduction skills to good use and telling some gullible guy that he's the only one who understands her. Luna might tell her sob story about Poppy Nozawa, Romy Park, and act like none of this is her fault. If Luna plays her cards right, she could convince a prison guard to fall madly in love with her and ultimately break her out. Luna might assure her prison guard boyfriend that they can build a life together if he'll just help her make a quick getaway. Our B&B predictions point to more Luna developments down the road, so stick with us for updates on any stunning news that might be brewing. The Bold and the Beautiful spoilers say Luna could go free for another storyline one way or another, so stay tuned. Be sure to make CDL your favorite hotspot for all the sizzling Bold and the Beautiful spoilers, predictions, news, and updates you need. Luna Nozawa wasn't always the person who found herself on the wrong side of the law. Once an ambitious and driven individual, her life had taken a drastic turn, and now she sat behind cold, metallic bars, reflecting on where it had all gone wrong. Being locked away wasn't something Luna had ever envisioned for herself, and she certainly wasn't someone who could accept a fate of incarceration easily. But for Luna, time spent in confinement wasn't just about remorse. It was about plotting, scheming, and planning her next move. From the moment the prison doors clanged shut behind her, reality began to sink in for Luna. She was no longer in control, no longer able to manipulate those around her. The life she had once enjoyed, of freedom, power, and control, had slipped from her grasp. But Luna was not one to give up easily. She had always thrived in chaos, and now, faced with criminal charges and the prospect of spending years behind bars, she saw only one path forward: escape. Luna's downfall had begun with a confession. Pushed into a corner by circumstances beyond her control, she had admitted to her wrongdoings. Her actions, fueled by a mix of desperation and ambition, had landed her in jail. The people around her had no choice but to turn their backs on her, and now she was left to face the consequences of her own choices. But Luna had never been one to wallow in self-pity. Even as she sat in her cell, the gears of her mind were turning, piecing together a plan that could get her out of this mess. She knew she had to be clever, cunning, even if she wanted to see the light of day again. Redemption wasn't something Luna was particularly interested in. Nice girls didn't get ahead, and Luna had always thrived on being the villain in her own story. As she lay on the cold, hard cot in her cell, staring up at the dimly lit ceiling, Luna began to formulate a plan, an escape plan. Luna had heard the stories of the legendary Sheila Sharp and her many escapades. One tale, in particular, stood out to her: Sheila's daring prison escape with the help of a lovesick prison guard. Sheila had used her charm and manipulative skills to seduce Mike Guthrie, convincing him to help her break out of prison. The idea intrigued Luna. She knew she had the charm and the cunning to pull off a similar scheme. While Sheila's story was one for the history books, Luna couldn't help but imagine herself following in her footsteps. Why should she be any different? She had already manipulated people into doing her bidding before. Why not do it again? The key to Luna's escape, she realized, lay not in brute force, but in seduction, in manipulation. If she could find a guard willing to listen to her sob story, to believe her lies, then she might have a chance. As Luna scanned the faces of the guards who patrolled the prison, one stood out to her. He wasn't much older than her, a fresh-faced, nervous young man who seemed out of place in the harsh world of incarceration. He wasn't like the others. He was new to the job, green, and clearly struggling to fit in. His name was Nate, and Luna could see the way he avoided the other guards, keeping to himself, afraid to engage in the rough banter that dominated their interactions. It was almost too easy. Luna began to observe Nate from afar, watching him as he made his rounds. She could sense the vulnerability in him, the loneliness that radiated from his every movement. He was perfect, a prime target for her plan. Luna knew how to read people, and Nate was practically begging for attention, for someone to make him feel special needed. And Luna was more than willing to play the part of the damsel in distress if it meant securing her freedom. The first step in Luna's plan was to get Nate's attention, and that part was easy enough. One afternoon, while he was patrolling the cell block, Luna called out to him. Her voice was soft, sweet, and vulnerable. She asked him for a simple favor. Could he get her an extra blanket? The nights were cold, and she was freezing in her cell. Nate hesitated at first, unsure if he should grant such a request. But as Luna flashed him a smile, one filled with gratitude and innocence, he relented. It was a small favor, after all. What harm could it do? From there, Luna began to slowly reel him in. Each day, she would engage him in conversation, asking about his life, his interests, and his dreams. She played the role of the misunderstood woman who had made a few mistakes, but wasn't truly bad at heart. She spun tales of how she had been forced into her criminal life, how circumstances had pushed her to the edge. And Nate, young and naive, ate it all up. Soon, their conversations became more frequent, and Nate began to linger at her cell longer than he should have. Luna could see the way he looked at her, the way his eyes lingered on her face, his cheeks flushing slightly whenever she smiled at him. It was working. He was falling for her. As their relationship progressed, Luna began to lay the groundwork for her true intentions. She started to talk about her life outside of prison, about the dreams she had for the future. She painted a picture of a life they could have together, a life where they were free from the shackles of their current circumstances. "Nate," she whispered one day as he stood outside her cell, "I know you feel it too. This connection between us. I've never felt this way about anyone before. You understand me in a way that no one else does." Nate, caught up in the fantasy Luna was weaving, nodded. He was completely under her spell now. Luna took a deep breath, knowing the moment had come to plant the seed of her escape plan. "I can't stay in here forever," she said softly. "I don't belong here, Nate. You know that. If you help me, we can run away together. We can start over, build a life far away from all of this." Nate's eyes widened in shock. "Luna, I can't. I'd lose everything." But Luna wasn't about to give up. She leaned closer to the bars, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "You won't lose me. Don't you want to be with me? We can have a future, Nate. All you have to do is help me get out of here." For days, Luna worked on Nate, breaking down his resistance little by little. She used every tool at her disposal, her charm, her vulnerability, her beauty. And slowly, Nate began to crack. He started to believe that Luna was his way out of the mundane life he led as a prison guard. He convinced himself that helping her escape was the right thing to do, that they were meant to be together. The plan was simple. Nate would disable the security cameras during his shift, allowing Luna to slip out unnoticed. He would provide her with a change of clothes and a way out of the prison. Once they were outside, they would make a run for it, disappearing into the night, far away from the reach of the law. But Luna, ever the manipulator, had no intention of sticking around with Nate once she was free. He was merely a pawn in her game, someone she could use to get what she wanted. Once she was out, she planned to disappear on her own, leaving Nate to face the consequences of his actions. However, what Luna didn't realize was that Nate wasn't as naive as she thought. While he had fallen for her act initially, doubts had begun to creep into his mind. He started to question whether Luna truly cared about him or if she was simply using him for her own gain. Unbeknownst to Luna, Nate had confided in another guard, someone older and wiser, who had warned him about getting involved with an inmate. The guard's words echoed in Nate's mind as he stood outside Luna's cell, wondering if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. The night of the planned escape arrived, and Luna waited in her cell, confident that everything was going according to plan. But as the hours ticked by, Nate never came. Instead, the sound of footsteps echoed through the cell block, and Luna's heart raced with anticipation, only to find herself staring into the cold, unforgiving eyes of the prison warden. Nate had betrayed her. Luna's escape plan had failed, and she was left to face the consequences of her actions. Nate, torn between his feelings for her and his duty as a prison guard, had made the choice to turn her in, ensuring that she would remain behind bars. As Luna sat alone in her cell, the weight of her failure pressing down on her, she realized that she had underestimated Nate, and that her time in prison was far from over. But Luna wasn't one to give up easily. Even in defeat, her mind continued to churn with new ideas, new schemes. She would bide her time, waiting for the next opportunity to present itself. Because if there was one thing Luna knew,